drawing the correlation between diet and dreams or nightmares. This is a real interesting survey in regard to dietary patterns which result either in the worst of dreams or the best of dreams. But let's get right into the research as follows. More dreams of the rare bit fiend. Now, it's an interesting story that we'll get to in a second. Food sensitivity and dietary correlates of sleep and dreaming. All right, so here's part of the backstory. What they're looking for when you see Rarebit Fiend is a cartoonist, Winsor McKay, quoting, published bizarre dreams that the cartoon protagonist frequently attributed to having eaten something called Welsh rarebit or rabbit, and it has nothing to do with rabbit, a spicy melted cheese toast or other cheese dish prior to sleep. And to give you a little bit of the backstory, here is part of the cartoon from 1913. As you can see, the Rarebit Fiend. And then what is rarebit? A cheesy dessert. That's important. Why? Because there was a correlation back then by eating these cheesy desserts at night, it would trigger nightmares. Henceforth, the cartoons or animations, cartoons back then. All right, let's get right into the backstory as follows. In sum, there's a limited but growing body of research that supports the age-old beliefs that food can influence the content of dreaming and in particular the occurrence of nightmares. The present study was designed to shed new light on why dreaming and nightmares are often thought to be food dependent. Interesting discoveries here. Our objective, quoting, was to test several hypotheses about food relationships to dreaming, namely that food-specific effects of food-induced stress and sleep effect hypotheses, which they used, as you can see, a total of 1,082 participants in the data collection took place between January and April of 2023. All right, let's begin with image number 1. This is what the telling part of the story is. All right, the grand feast of blame. That's a little publisher bias, making it a little bit more interesting than actually looking at the raw data itself. But here we have the number one thing, the dream villains, desserts and sweets, then followed, of course, by cheese or cheesy food per se. Henceforth, the correlation between the Welsh Rarebit Fiend and the cartoons and the nightmares. All right, now you get the correlation. All right, looking down the list of all the foods, now there's foods that were also associated with pleasant dreams. As you can see, fruits, vegetables, and herbal teas. There's an interesting hypothesis, I should say, that they postulated in regard to why those result in pleasant dreams. Timing of diet and other things like that are also important. And just to give reference, this is what the original data looked like until we printed it up. All right, then after that, we look at this. Behind the dreams, this is the methodology. I'll leave it real fast because we already went through part of it. And for the sake of speed, let's move to the next one. All right, your eating habits and nightly adventure also play a huge role. Night eating, meaning like waking up and eating a midnight snack and so on and so forth. Evening eating is like eating a late meal and having a dessert afterwards. Now, if we look before, sweets, dairy in particular, you could see how ice cream at night or midnight snacking takes on a whole new paradigm. All right, the connection to what each one does, as you can see there. And then food sensitivities play a huge role, especially lactose intolerance. The hypothesis, we'll go through that in a second. You see your food sensitivities, so you can get the picture. If you correlate an individual having lactose intolerance, eating ice cream really late at night is the perfect scenario for creating not the most pleasant dreams. And now I'll show you the blueprints on how to create nightmares and also how to create good dreams as well towards the end here in a second. All right, let's get back to the study as follows. Move this one aside. All right, here we go. Some of the highlights. Consistent with the possibility, or this possibility, is the finding that a slowly digested versus a quickly digested meal taken late in the evening disrupts sleep via the effects of the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. This is where you get the good, they postulate this hypothesis, a double-double hypothesis, in that both types of evening meals increase morning cortisol. So, such psychological, physiological effects, changes, could contribute to nightmare production considering the frequent nightmares are characterized by blunted morning cortisol, while acute nightmares are associated with elevated cortisol. So that's a real interesting as far as possible hypothesis in regard to why these foods that digest very slowly may play a role in that hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. All right, proceed forward. Let's go to 5 and 6 as promised. How to create good dreams and bad dreams. All right, here's the graphic, creating the best of dreams. Foods associated with that, as you can see, fruits, vegetables, and herbal teas. Those seem to basically encourage nice dreams. Now, for those which are a little bit either masochistic or sadomasochist or whatever, and you want to have a nightmarish meal before, let's say, Halloween or Hallows Eve, here's your blueprint for the worst nightmares, especially for those with food sensitivities and those that decide to eat late at night or midnight snacking. Desserts and sweets, dairy, especially if sensitive, and spicy and heavy meats. Anything that really takes a lot of work to digest, it appears, has the most profound effect. There's your blueprint for the worst nightmares. All right, now to conclude. So, what's our conclusion? In broad outline, these results are consistent with previous findings that a healthy eating style is so associated with more vivid dreaming and higher dream recall, while an unhealthy eating style is associated with more disturbing dreams or lower recall. So you have bad dreams, less likely to remember. It can kind of be a wash in some cases. Thus, the present results add empirical observations to age-old beliefs that food affects dreaming. They demonstrate that food-dependent dreaming predicts nightmare frequency and severity, with dairy and sweets most commonly being blamed, i.e., basically the rabbit fiend. They show that food sensitivities, lactose intolerance in particular, are associated with nightmares often mediated by GA symptoms. Together, the findings lend support that several hypotheses about food-dependent dreaming that clearly merit further study. Experimental paradigms in which food intake is systematically manipulated could be useful to bear on exploring these hypotheses. Again, correlation doesn't necessarily show a causal relationship. It just shows they're strongly correlated with one another, at least in regard to this particular survey results. All right, now I'll show you the next cartoon, just to show you again this 1913 series that was basically attributed to the rarebit fiend. Now that we know that it is, that cheesy meal, i.e., it's quite interesting. But what a wonderful, fun research study in regard to helping improve the quality of your nightly adventures, whether it be a good dream or a nightmare. Now you can see how you can manipulate that in certain ways biologically to achieve the outcome that you desire or not. Again, gratitude to the researchers, a wonderful, wonderful, fun study, something you could revisit again, maybe towards Hallows Eve. But anyways, incredible. I am humble you watch, in gratitude as well, and see what you and I both discover next week. All right, catch y'all next time. See you there. Bye.